Hey all, welcome to Soul in the Game podcast. In this episode, we will talk to Marissa, who is all about remote working. She is passionate about people taking up jobs to work remotely and also helps them to figure out their lifestyle around remote work. Stay tuned. First of all, welcome to Soul in the Game podcast. And I'm very happy to have you on this show. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, Marissa. Good. So I met you on Sahil's Minimalist Entrepreneur course, and I know you from past 3 weeks. And I feel like I've worked with you enough to have this conversation because I really love your work ethics and your principles and the product itself that you're building. So I'm very excited to chat all about that today.
Thank you so much. That's really kind. Thank you.
So yeah, let's start about your product and how you
Yeah.
got into it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I started the company Remote Work Prep back in 2018. I had
Mhm.
actually gone remote in 2015, and then in 2017 I was starting to look for a new remote position, and I just realized like how many companies were just not doing it right, or were doing it in an unhealthy way. So I started Remote Work Prep as kind of like a side business, just to kind of help these companies figure out how to do remote work in a healthy, positive way, and then take advantage of all the benefits. Of course, I did not see 2020 coming. It came out of
Mhm.
nowhere. Things exploded very fast. I was just very fortunate to already be in the space. And basically, what we offer is just consulting services. So we come into the company and we act as kind of a fractional head of remote. We get everybody up and running with what they need, do training for managers and employees who are having trouble adjusting to the new way of work, and anything basically that they need to have like a healthy, positive experience with remote work. So yeah, that's basically what we do and a brief history of our background.
That's awesome. Did you get super busy starting 2020 in
Oh
March?
yes.
So how was that transition?
It was actually pretty rough because I ended up getting COVID in the first week of
Oh.
March and having it for around 6 weeks. So the same time that everything shut down and everybody started contacting me, I was very sick. So it was definitely a rough adjustment. Obviously, I got better, and that's amazing. And I was very lucky to do so. But yes, it was a very, very interesting year.
Yeah. So let's see the remote work prep, right? I have worked in corporates and have been to work, like I've traveled, I've spent a lot of time traveling and having that transition that I really hated to transition between, like, for example, as soon as I arrive at work, I felt like I was not ready to work. I had traveled like an hour driving and my mind was everywhere and I had to bring back to that reading, starting to read the emails or getting into the flow state of working in the office. So is what do you um, what's your pitch for people to take remote work prep? For example, for me it was travel time. I did not want to travel, I wanted to save time. Is that what you think, or is there more than that?
Yeah, I absolutely think that there's more than that. And I think it will depend on the individual. So for me, it's all about how remote work brings back individual choice. So when you're thinking about an in person office job, you don't really have much control over the commute. You don't have much control over like the temperature, the seat you're in, who you're working around, all of these environmental factors that end up having a heavy impact on your work. You have close to zero control. Versus when you're remote, you can do things like work in a co working space if you still want to work around people, or you can set up a home office, or you can work from multiple places, and you just have much more personal control over your environment, and that ends up reflecting on your work, because if you're in a comfortable space, then you end up doing better work. So for me, it's going to be different for every single person on what really drives them towards remote work, but that's kind of the point too. It's like a personal freedom.
Right. And I feel when we are working and in a workspace, right, in an office setting, we don't really pay attention to those things, and we don't even
Hmm.
realize they have an impact on us. I think majority of us probably realized it when COVID hit and we were forced to work from home. And initially, everyone struggled how to transition from going to office to having those boundaries within the house to work, right?
Hmm.
Which is a good segue for me to ask you about how is that one of your business principles to have that boundary set up, because that's one of the challenges when we all of us are in the house, especially if we have kids, having set up that boundary of okay, what this is the time I start my work and end my work. It's easier at workplace when we do it to apply, but in the house it is hard, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that a lot of people need to get used to the fact that they've been in person for so long and doing one thing, in this case, work, in one way for so long that adjusting overnight is just not going to happen. And it's going to take some time. And one of the things that is going to take time is figuring out what boundaries you need and how to set them up, and how it's different for each person depending on your situation. Like you're talking about, like with kids or with no kids, or like everybody's situation is different. So there's a couple of things here. So one, there's two parts to boundaries. There's the physical part of boundaries, which people tend to understand better. It's like having a separate workspace, keeping things separate. And then there's the virtual boundaries part, which you don't hear about as often, but it's actually more important than the physical boundaries. So virtual boundaries are like, are you getting the notifications for work and your personal life in the same place at the same time? If you go onto your browser, are you able to go to a website like Facebook and then also your work email at the same time? That usually shows that you have poor virtual boundaries. And that means that your personal life and your work life are going to be like overlapping more, and it will end up stressing you out. So, virtual boundaries is typically where I recommend people start.
Mm, that's a great topic, because when I'm thinking of boundaries, I'm mostly thinking about physical boundary, and we probably don't even pay attention to this virtual boundary and having all this notification. That's amazing. And do you work with individuals or is it more business to business?
Oh, absolutely, with individuals. Yeah. Yeah, lots of
Oh,
individuals come to us because it's honestly a very personal experience when you switch to remote work, and there's so many things that you can do. People can be, pretty overwhelmed, and they've been doing, like I said, one thing one way for so long. It just takes some getting used to, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So that's when people come to us, is to help kind of break that down, bring up the parts that are most useful for them, and guide them through like our years of experience so they don't have to go through those years.
yeah, yeah. That I would totally need that if I was starting, like, having not didn't know what I know now. Initially, I think I would totally want that help.
Yeah.
It is so that's awesome, Marissa. I really like, and no, I know working with you, you're very clear about what you're offering, right? In our course itself, having that clarity, for example, is such an important aspect of any of the product that we are providing. So yeah, that's
Thank
amazing.
you.
So we will I want to go into more details about how you got into this, like your personal story of starting this, right? Why this? Because the show is soul in the game, and why are you in this?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's definitely a larger story. So, I've been in the tech industry for basically as long as I can remember. Even as a kid, I had toured and competed internationally in robotics events as like lead programmer and did a whole bunch of stuff in the tech space. So it became a no-brainer um, to go that route in my career. However, when I went that route, I ended up in a lot of toxic work situations. Tech isn't super friendly to women, as I'm sure you know. And I was just in a very toxic work situation right before I went remote. I had it was a very uncomfortable situation where I had mostly like pretty much a stalker coming after me. And I just took the first opportunity that I could to get out of that situation. And it ended up being a remote position completely by accident. I wasn't trying to target a remote job. I didn't even think it was possible to work full time remotely. It just kind of fell into my lap and it came at the perfect moment because I really needed to have more control over my environment and get more comfortable with that so that I could be comfortable in the industry again. Um, so yeah, it really came out of nowhere. I ended up loving it, really wanting to expand the experiences for others and make sure that there was enough opportunity in the space. So then I started my business. Yeah.
You sound so passionate about that. That's amazing. Like I can totally feel the energy there. I'm sure people who choose to, get to work with you, they find it so easy to transition, and because that's the energy we need to start this journey at any cost. So yeah, that's amazing. And I'm sorry for the issues you mentioned you faced earlier in the career, and that's a whole another topic of discussion. I think.
Absolutely. And it's not uncommon. Like a lot of people experience toxic work situations in many different areas. And I'm just very passionate in what remote work brings to those people. It brings a more positive environment, a healthier place for them, and helps them do their job the best that they can because they're comfortable.
Sure, Marissa. So I'm just giving for the audience purpose, right? Let's pick like top toxic situations at
Mhm.
work that probably we may not even think about, but we are in there. We get too used to it, right?
Right.
And yeah, what are those? You think?
Yeah, so there's many different ones on many different levels. Obviously, there's discrimination when it comes to race or gender or anything, is always a terrible place to be in and doesn't provide the psychological safety that you need to be the best at what you do. Then there's on like a totally different end of the spectrum. There can be as simple as like the people in the office having office politics, where it matters more about how long you've been in the position or how long you're at your desk all day versus the actual output and quality of value that you provide. So there's lots of different routes to that. Um, and it's hard to see like there's something as simple as like the office temperature being kept to a temperature that's just way too cold for certain people or way too hot for certain people, and it all plays into that, just not having the environment you need to be successful.
Sure. Yeah. That those are like I can totally resonate to that. I always felt super cold at work,
Mhm.
and and I'm in the sustainability area, right? So for me, working from home is like the perfect place to be in. It cut down all the environmental impacts and improves the sustainability part for the
Absolutely.
company itself. So yeah, your distributed teams, right?
Hmm.
Without we are coming back to the remote work environment now,
Hmm.
and talking about distributed teams without endless meetings. So I've worked from home during COVID time last whole year, and even before that, actually, I was working from home. And meetings was one of the top time consuming aspect in my work environment.
Mm.
So how do you? I do see that you're point on or your advocate of distributed teams with without having these meetings, endless meetings. So how do we navigate that? And I'm sure it's not related to only my experience. I've spoken to my friends, and I know many people talking about this endless meetings. So yeah, I would love to
Absolutely.
hear on that from you.
Yeah, it's typically a problem you see when companies are not setting up remote work in a positive way. So they're typically just trying to replicate what they did in the office instead of take advantage of what remote work has to offer. And typically, when I see those companies and I'm talking to them, it's more about introducing them to a new way of work. And in this case, it's introducing them to synchronous versus asynchronous work. So, synchronous work is very real time, like both people need to be online and available at the same time to work together. This would typically be like a meeting you had via Zoom. Versus asynchronous work is two people do not need to be online at the same time, yet they're still working together in a positive, effective way, but they're both respecting each other's time and doing it when it works for them. Um, so for me, I work for a company that has people distributed across 20 countries. Of course, that means many, many time zones. And when that happens, you want to be respectful of people's time. So, what we typically do is we set clear expectations on when people should have overlapping time for those synchronous work hours, while also being clear that outside of those periods, they can work when and where they want. Um, in order to do that, you have to have very clear expectations, clear communication practices, lots of different things set up, but it's 100% worth it because you end up not being in meetings all day. You end up, everybody is working the hours that they want and during the times that work best for them. So, in this case, like we talked about before, when the conditions aren't right in the environment, you don't do your best work. Same time, it's the same thing when it comes to the time you work. So certain people like to work at like 10 p.m. at night. That would suck for me. I would do awful work at that time. So them being able to get to choose the periods of time that they work. So it comes with a ton of benefits, but it does take some time to set up and some intentionality around it.
Yeah, yeah. That is that is important because I also saw that, I mean, I have worked in like maybe 3 to 4 different time zones, but
Mm-hmm.
having to manage all these super diverse. We are becoming more and more global, and then all these teams all over the world. It is definitely a challenge, and to bring them all together. And how do you work on the, like, for example, I loved your tweet on this serendipitous moment, right? You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the coffee break. Is it really important? Or I love how detailed you go into that. Can you share that in your own words? I mean, I've read your tweets, but I want to know what is the emotion behind that. Can you go into that, please?
Yeah, yeah. So this is another example of like people had been talking about how they weren't seeing the same serendipity. So when people are in person in office, how they would go to like a coffee station and talk to their coworker, and then something magical would happen or something would come from it. And what was really happening though was that they were trying to replicate in in-person office online, and you can't do that. So the serendipity wasn't happening just because it was magical, like there's all these influences around it, like you were in
Mm.
the same office at the same time. There's just all these different influences, and then you're putting none of those influences within remote work but then still expecting the same result. So basically, what I was saying was to provide some structure around your remote work life and provide the opportunity for those situations to happen. And then they do. So one of those examples is coffee break. So we will typically have a every other week coffee break, and of course the time period and when it happens should be totally up to the company. But just giving a space for people to log on and to chat together about non-work topics and it being completely okay. gives the opportunity for bonding, gives the opportunity to learn about your coworkers, and then you'll naturally seek them out when something comes up that you know they're familiar with. So yeah, it's just about thinking about things in a different way.
Yeah, I see that. I think it's not just, remote work, but there are so many um, aspects of it that needs to be planned
Mm-hmm.
well, because the companies really struggled when the switch had to be made. And if I'm an employee, and how do I convince my, for example, my manager or their managers to change this setting, to not have back to back 1 hour meetings like for next 4 hours, right? I need to take a break, or I need to have time
Mm-hmm.
off. Yeah, how do I convince them? Is that something I can do? What do you think?
Yeah, it's difficult. I'm hesitant to put the responsibility on the employee. Um, just because I don't think it is their responsibility. I know that they are affected by it, and of course they should communicate with their managers and all of that, but really it should be the managers and the companies looking at these things that they're doing and saying, is this providing the best value for our business and to our employees? So I'm really hesitant to put it all on the employees. But the way I go about it is one, asking questions. So not coming from the standpoint of this is right, this is wrong, because there aren't really clearly defined lines that you can make for all companies in regards to what is right and wrong for them. So instead, being like, hey, where can I find time to get the work that we're discussing done with the current schedule, or asking them how they're going about doing it? Are they having the same struggles, learning more and communicating that way? And then it's really on the managers to really see these difficulties and the things that their team members are struggling with, and seeking out alternative options. I don't think that they have all the answers, because like I said, this is new, this is different. They shouldn't have all the answers, honestly. Um, but there are lots of resources like I share publicly online. I know lots of other remote work advocates that share publicly online. The answers are out there. They just need to recognize that they need them first.
Yes, yes, Marissa. It is, I remember one of the times where I had a meeting starting almost 7 a.m. because we were working with India time
Hmm.
zone. And there it was about 7:30 p.m. and we went on and on and on, and it was almost like 10:30
Oh
for
man.
us and 11 p.m. for them. And everybody was online still, but you could hear, like, in the background, either the kids crying or families being called. And I was like, what's the point of all this? It's we are working for our family, but it's taking up all this valuable time that we should be spending with them.
Absolutely.
and and I think the more I think about your project, or the company that you're trying to advocate for, I feel it will impact all the whole society. Whoever takes up this, it impacts them personally. It gives them so much time back. The value and the quality of life that will be improved. It will be so nice. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
I mean, my
I'm,
objective, I feel like the way it is run right now is that life revolves around work. You have to decide where you live and like what times you're at, or what times you're with your kids are all revolving around when you're at work. Versus, I want to flip it. I want work to revolve around life. And this means that you get to choose when you work instead of like maybe 8 hours straight. Maybe you break it off into like 2 hours at a time. And in between those times, you get to spend time with your family or do hobbies you love, or, like cook a fantastic meal. Like those can all happen in between, instead of just having like this 8 hour straight block that you're at work and that's it. Like you don't get any choice around it. It doesn't matter if that's the times that you work your best hours. It just puts the control back into the individual, and that way they can have a life that's their choosing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I take yoga breaks now, right?
Mm-hmm.
or when I used to take yoga breaks, and that was such a nice go out and come back of this work context, and it's healthy for the brain
Absolutely.
because we are not really constantly thinking or looking at the screen. Just that having that break brings a lot of quality work when I'm getting back to working again. So without having to travel or drive or do anything. So I think that's very crucial for our own self, better self or mental health as well. So yeah, yeah. And finally, I mean, I'm not gonna. This is a short um, introduction to the remote working space, and I think we can continue later on, like have a, based on how I get the response, we can continue, have another session later on.
Yeah.
But now I want to move to the almost like at the closing part of the conversation, right?
Hmm.
If I have to, like for example today, I'm going back to my work. Let's say I we are post pandemic, we are all getting back to normal. There are a lot of companies who have made work from home permanent, but there are again companies who are, they already have the infrastructure set, and they have they've been paying the bills for whatever utilities, right? So how do I start thinking about this? Because I'm experienced now, let's say I'm experienced working from home, but how do I come back when my employer is wanting me to go back? Do I work with the HR team, or do I set up a community inside to talk about working from home, or how do I proceed?
Yeah, I would definitely talk to the leaders in the org to talk about how you feel like your work has improved because you're working from home, and bringing up statistics around, like we talked about, sustainability. Then on the business end, they most likely had cost cutting measures as well because they didn't have the office. Um, there's a lot of benefits that end up coming to because of remote work. And I think that the companies that choose to be in person only are going to face fierce competition. So everybody's vaccinated, COVID's over, all that stuff. We still have so many companies that have seen the light and have decided to go with remote work. And these companies that decide to just be in person only, they're going to have to make that decision. Like, is it worth like some of their staff just being like, I can have this opportunity elsewhere and I will choose to go elsewhere. So they'll have to give some serious thought as to whether it's going to be worth that. um, Also bringing up just how to do it in a positive way. Some people have experienced remote work during this pandemic, and it wasn't actually remote work. It was office work during a pandemic at home, which is very, very different. So talking to experts in the space on how to get it set up appropriately so that everybody can take advantage of all the benefits um, is very, very important. So there's a bunch of ways that you can go about it, but also remember that if your company is only in person, you can find new opportunities in the space because it's grown so much.
Yeah, that's true. It is. We can always work around, and the competition is something I
Yeah.
think everybody has to, look out for, and with so much better pay and then better work schedules that will be provided with by the companies who encourage work from home versus do not encourage, that is going to be a tough challenge. But how does LinkedIn? I think the survey before pandemic, they were. I was reading a LinkedIn survey about remote work transitioning to more people going to remote work. So, do you have like a number, or like just a rough idea of the percentage of that who transitioned? I'm just curious.
I honestly don't know just yet. I don't think anyone would be able to give that number until, like everybody's been vaccinated, people are less afraid to go out. Um, I do know there's something called the State of Remote Work report that comes out from a company called Buffer. Buffer has been fully remote since well before pre-pandemic, and they've come out with this yearly report. For as long as I can remember. I honestly don't know when they started. But in that report, they did survey everyone to see, oh, if would you choose to go remote for the future, like when things are back to normal. And it was a very high number that would choose to go remote. So there's definitely data out there, and from everybody I've talked to, the number one reason they were given pre-pandemic that they couldn't go remote was that, oh, the company just couldn't do it. Like the company couldn't run. Well, we've seen the companies can run while remote, so they can't use that excuse anymore. So it will be interesting to see what happens this summer.
Yeah, company cannot run as a was
Definitely
yeah, doesn't.
debunked. Yes.
Yes, definitely. So, Marissa, thank you so much. If listeners want to get in touch with you, what are some of the social places they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very active on Twitter, and my handle is at MAR15SA. I also have a newsletter all about questioning the defaults of work, and you can sign up for that at subscribe.marissagoldberg.com.
Awesome. I will put that in my description in the podcast when I publish it as well. If you have listeners have access to that, they can look it up. And finally, Marissa, I really enjoy talking about remote work, actually. And I think I have not come across anybody who's as passionate as you about remote working. So thank you so much for taking time to go over your service and explaining why this is important and bringing all that passion, which is totally, I can totally see that. So
Yeah,
thank
thank you
you.
so much for having me, Salmia. I really appreciate you taking the time to interview me. And yeah, I'm here if anyone has any questions or wants to have a better remote work experience.
Awesome. Hope you all enjoyed listening to this production. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment or a review. And if you are listening to this on YouTube, then you can leave the comment there, or you can leave a voice message comment on Anchor. I'd love to hear your feedback, and please review and share if you can. Thank you.